Good day, traders. Edge with high-tech trading analysis. Today I want to talk to you about my supply and demand multi-time framed indicator for NinjaTrader 8. Now, what I'm trying to do is identify areas of supply and demand, support and resistance, turning points, previous areas that the market turned, and then utilize that to decide whether or not when price gets back to that area again, that it's either going to be rejected, such as we had here. We created a zone here, price comes back down into it, it got rejected and moved up. Or possibly even break out of that area, such as this area up here. We formed a zone here. This is a broken one now. Retraced from it, came back to it, it held and we broke down. But the next time it came back up to it, we broke out. So I use it both ways. And you have to be able to use it both ways. Inherently, this type of indicator, you're really bucking the trend per se. If my trend here is coming down and we form some type of supply area right here, the trend is down. So the next time we come into that area to buy this, we're actually bucking that trend that we were just on. Now, if we look at this, it comes down, we're looking at price action in here, price action here looks pretty good, and we play that to the upside, that's fine. But we have to be aware that if it breaks this, we need to be able to look to the other side as well. So let's just, as all of my indicators, I place an icon in NinjaTrader 8's toolbar. And if we left click on that icon, it brings down a drop down menu. The first item is the multi-time frame portion of this, and I'm going to skip this for just a second and we'll come back to it. What I want to look at first is our strength settings, or talk just a little about how these zones are formed on your chart. I provide you two settings. Now, what these settings do is somehow or another, if this zone down here, if we're going to draw some type of area on our chart to represent supply or support or whatever nomenclature you want to use for that, we need to have some type of qualifiers. So my left-hand strength is what I consider a qualifier. A bar, any bar, every bar has to be, from a demand standpoint or a support standpoint, this bar has to be the lowest bar of our strength setting. So in our case right now, that bar has to be the lowest bar of the last 48 bars. And then it qualifies to possibly be a point that we look at. Now, our right hand strength is what we're going to call our confirmation. So even though we have a qualifier that says, okay, this can be and possibly is a zone of some type, we need a confirmation of how many bars is it going to take before we say, yes, this condition is met. You wouldn't want to set that on like 1, because let's just say that we're coming down here. This could have been the lowest low, and in 1 bar, that would be a zone. The next bar would qualify. The next bar would qualify. So you would never want to look at a 1 bar confirmation. How I would look at this is a crude chart, looks like 30 minutes. I think the default settings are 48 and 4. 4 is pretty common on what I tend to use, anywhere between 3 and 5. If you get too low, you start that stepping action, and you'll start to see these. Well, let's just do it. If we were to set this on 1, come on, you can see that we have one here. Looks like another one qualified here, another one qualified here. I've got a 48, but got the stepping action here. Here's one, next bar, next bar. Too low of a right setting is not necessarily a good thing. The larger that your left hand strength is set, the more pertinent I feel the zones that you're looking at are going to be. Now, I tend to like the larger settings on the left-hand side. As a matter of fact, even on some of my smaller charts, I'll use a left-hand setting of 100 and a right-hand setting. I've got a 2-tick hybrid Renko chart. Left is set on 100 and right is set on, I don't know, somewhere between 3 and 5. It all depends on sometimes the instrument, the volatility, the ranges. You know, every instrument can be a bit different, but how I might start is, let's take a look at this. I'm going to go to a 15-minute chart, and this is my default setting on this 15-minute chart currently. See the stepping action? Now, if I were to increase the right hand strength for the confirmation, I could remove some of those. Let's just take this, and instead of 4, we'll use 8. Notice how these are removed. Now, there's a give and take to that, and the take is that we get to remove some unwanted zones. The give is it takes that much longer for that to show up on your chart. Okay, so let's do this. Let's crank this 12 and 4. Now, the reason why I might do this is just I'm on a 15-minute chart, right? So if I set right hand strength to 4, that means that my confirmation, I'm confirming it within the hour. And I'm going back 12. I have 4 bars in every hour. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. I've got a qualifier of every 3 hours. It's just how I might look at it. And, you know, on a 5-minute chart, just do the same type of calculations. Okay, let's look at a little more data. Let's turn our broken zones off for a minute. And this isn't enough. I must not have clicked apply. Okay, this is with a 12-4 on a 15-minute chart. Now, let me discuss some issues that I had even within myself with NinjaTrader 7. In NinjaTrader 7, we allowed you to go in and remove this. If we left click on this, we could delete that zone. We could come up to this other zone and we could unlock it and we could move it around. And that was about the extent of it. And then you could move you could adjust your zones kind of the way you wanted to see it. The biggest problem I have with that is that if you refresh your chart, all of that work you just did to get your zones right is lost. So here in NinjaTrader 8, what I have done is well, several things really. If we left click on a zone to highlight it, and then we right click, we're now introduced into a context menu. And in that menu, we can now merge zones, we can remove zones, we can insert zones, we can lock and unlock all of our zones, we can move and manipulate our zones any way that we want to see fit. Now, let's look at that specifically. Here, if I was looking at this, since this didn't make it up, this zone this is all really part of that zone. The problem was this zone right here that was created here should probably be a little bigger, meaning if I unlock this zone, and I would have brought that down to where that should have been in the first place, right? And now we look over here to the right side. We can see that the zone that we just created that was below it really was nothing more than the test that the zone should have been in the first place. So now we're not always going to be able to see that and adjust that zone, but I could have adjusted that zone and saved that file. I'll show you that here in a minute. And well, let me step back just a little further. Okay, so let's just say that we went through here and we deleted, I'll fix that right away. And we deleted them and we manipulated them. We removed that one. We made this like we want it. The problem that we have is now the minute that I refresh my chart or close my workspace and reopen it, I lose all of the work I just did. It's all back to the way it was. Here's what I've done for NinjaTrader 8. So I'm going to make this chart look like I would want it. I would merge this with the previous, and this would be the area I want to look at up here on the top. I can see that would have been a good play right here. This, I don't really even want on my chart, to be honest with you. I don't know that I consider this a supply zone, but I'll leave it for now. This down here, same thing. I would want to merge this with the previous zone. Now, if I would have right-clicked on this and said merge with the next zone, it would have merged with this zone up here. This zone down here, I'm going to unlock. I'm going to take the lock off. What I could have done rather is just unlock all the zones, and that way I don't have to go through individually. The problem with unlocking them all is now they're all unlocked, and if you click on that and you can accidentally move them. Just be aware of that. So if we come to this zone, I'm going to make it, we'll take it all the way up to about there. I am going to get rid of this one. And that's probably about how I would want to look at it. Now, if I'm going to close my workspace right now, I want this to come back up just like this the next time. What I've given you the ability to do is if we click on our drop down, at the very bottom we now have a new choice called zone files. We can do several things with them. We can save them, overwrite them, delete them, or use them. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to say save. I'm going to click here and I'm going to call this, let's say, CL 15 minute 1017. Where am I getting 1017 at? Today is Sunday, so 1015. And I'm going to click here and say save. Now, really, I prefer a different nomenclature, but we just saved that file. Okay, before I get too far, it is not being used. All we have done is just saved it. So if I refresh my chart right now, I'm going to go back to normal. Back. So now if we use our drop down icon, come down to zone files, and we come down here to the bottom where it says use zone file. If we click the drop down and select the file we just created and say click here to use that zone file, you can see that the zones we just saved and everything the way it was saved just came right back up. And now if I refresh or reload NinjaScript, everything is the way that I saved it. Well, possibly not everything. As you might have noticed, this we deleted, but yet it came back. Okay, when we save our zone file, we're going to save the zones the way they were. But now the logic at that point, from that point on, is going to continue to draw the zones the way that we have our strength set up. So even though I removed this, when it came back and saw these last bars on the chart, it said, hey, I need to recreate that, and it did. But just remember, when we have it saved real nice right now, but as this develops, if you've got this set on 2.4 or 4.2, excuse me, and even though you only have these few zones on your chart, this thing's going to start creating them just like you have your strength settings set up. The next thing below our strength is our region type. So we're looking at a region of this zone, and we can look at that in any number of ways. We can look at that as just being the wick portion of the bar. We can look at that as being the whole bar. We can look at that as going to the open or the close. Or if we use our drop down, we can look at that any one of those ways. The average range and the tick are not quite set up yet. I think the tick is, but it might be set for 6 ticks, and I don't have that property exposed yet. I'm adding the ability to make that a fixed width. Whatever bar you're on, whatever time frame you're on, if you want that zone to be 8 ticks wide, every time it's made, I'm going to give you that ability. We're also going to add in the ability for the average range, so that way it'll be dynamic to the bars instead of something static. So a couple more things to come. If I set this on bar, and the reason why it's not doing anything different is we're using the saved zones up to this point. So to look at what we just did without what we had saved, I come back to use zones, select the top blank one, click use select zones, and now I'm looking at when we originally, when we started off working with our zones, we're looking at this, and we combine these and combine these, but this is looking at wick. If I want to look at the whole bar, you can see in some cases my zones, the reason why I don't use bar a lot is because the zone is well without of my risk tolerance. 65 to 15, this is a 15-minute chart. I have 50 ticks worth of range in this zone. That doesn't help me in the style of trading that I do. But again, it depends on your style, what you're looking at, whether you're if you're trading stocks for long periods of time, this would work just fine. If all you want to look at is lines, okay, so we changed that, and now we're looking at lines. So it's extremely flexible in the way that you might want to look at it. I tend to, depending, when I'm looking at 15-minute, 30-minute, even 5-minute, I tend to look at wick just because that limits my risk. And I would have gone through and did what we did before, and I would probably be looking at that on my chart. Now, a couple other things. Show hide. If you wanna show the broken or hide the broken, I guess I should mention that. I'm showing the broken now, but I'm not seeing any broken on my chart. And that's because we're using the zone file. And I'm in the currently, the way that I am doing this, I'm not saving my broken zones to display on my chart. So if I wanted to see the broken zones, again, I would have to go back, take the zone file that I'm using off of my chart, and I could see all of the broken zones as well. So let's turn those back off. For broken zones, I'm showing region line dots and labels. And this is another thing I haven't quite got to yet. As you can see in the active zones, I give you a region, labels, a dot, and I still have to clean this up a bit. I'm not as happy as I'd like to be. But if you don't want to look at the lines and all you want to see is the actual opacity of the zone itself, I'll probably add a option to extend the zones all the way to the right hand portion of the chart. I don't look at it that way because I am normally I've always got a volume profile on the right hand part of my chart, and I prefer those zones not to get in the way of that, which is why it's currently set up. But I probably will add that feature in the future. If you don't want to look at the dots, you can turn all of this stuff off and on. Some of that is going to change. Right now, if you turn off the labels, it turns all the labels off, and I would really like there are times where I just don't want to see maybe the dot labels, but I do want to see the far right labels, so I need to clean that up just a little bit in its current state. Enable alerts. I give you the ability to turn on or off alerts on create and or alerts on break. So you can have one alert if a zone gets created. You can have another alert if that zone gets broken. That's about it here. We covered all of this. If you want to delete your zone files and clean them up, we just come in here, click on that, say delete. That won't be there the next time that we look at it. Let's talk about the multi-time frame portion of this a little bit. Right now I'm looking at a 5-minute chart. Let's take this to, a 15-minute chart. Let's take this to a 5-minute chart. Let's open this up a little bit. And these are the default zones based on the settings that we currently have, 12 and 4. Now these are pretty low settings, and we've got this set on wick as well. I could come up here and say, I want to look at the 15-minute that we just had. I want to look at the zones of the 15-minute on this chart. And I click apply, and you can see that the zones that we were looking at just a minute ago on the 15-minute are displayed right here on the 5. If I go back a little further, we'll see those that were down here. That there's about what we were looking at on the 15. Let's just do this. We'll duplicate this in a new window. We'll put this back on a 15-minute chart. Oops, wrong icon. We're going to set this back to defaults, apply settings, default settings, 15 minute. It knows what you're on, so you can apply the default settings or the multi-time frame. And what is being by default displayed on this 15-minute chart is now being displayed on our 5-minute chart. Now, even though this is a 5-minute chart, I'm not limited to just looking at minutes. I can look at tick, volume, range. Let's just, let's take, why am I not seeing volume? Let's say I want to look at volume 5,000. Uh-oh. Just took a minute to display because what I have to remember, what I just did was I've got 180 days of days loaded by default on my minute charts, and now I just loaded a volume chart in the background going back 180 days, and I had to calculate all of those values. So just be aware, if I load this on a minute chart, I can load a couple years worth of data, and this is pretty quick. If I load a year's worth of tick data, depending on how you have your settings, it might take some time for all of that to calculate on your chart. So again, very versatile here. Anytime, not any time frame. Okay, I was about to say any time frame on any chart, but any of these with any setting there as far as period type on any chart. So let's just take that back to 15 minutes. And I'm going to apply the default period back. So the next thing what we want to do is, we just saw that we could apply the 15-minute time period to this chart and get what we were looking at here originally. But originally I went through and I modified all this to look like I want it to look. What if I wanted to use that template on this chart? We can do that now too. We're just going to use our drop down, come down to the zone file. We're going to say use zone file, and what zone file did we create? This one right here. I'm going to say click to apply. Now that 15-minute zone file that we saved is now applied to my 5-minute chart, and I'm looking at it here. Now again, remember that even though I'm all the way up to this point in time, I'm looking at that template, this is going to start creating zones based on whatever settings we have for this chart. You'll have to modify those as time goes on to see them the way that we did to begin with. So let's take a look at our drop down. Did we miss anything? We covered all of our multi-time frame settings. We covered how the strengths are used. We covered our different zone types. Showing and displaying active, again, you can pretty much do what you need, but that'll be cleaned up quite a bit. And then the ability to save and use and overwrite and delete pretty much any type of zone file that you want on whatever type of chart you want. Now, if we go into the indicator properties themselves, and we look at our supply and demand, in our parameters, we have what we were looking at: our left strength, our right strength, our region type. If we want to make this multi-time frame, then this is going to overwrite whatever our default series on our chart is. I give you the ability to change the size and the color of the labels if you want to. We give you the ability to change the color and the opacity of the active zones, and then different settings for the broken. Just below for enable alerts, we enable our alerts. We can set them to an alert or a sound only, meaning if we use the alert, it's going to end up in NinjaTrader's alert box, as well as sounding a sound. If we use sound only, it doesn't end up in NinjaTrader's alert box. You have your choice. If you check enable alerts and you do not check either of these, you are not going to get any type of an alert. I mean, you have to have one of these on. I'll show you the reason why we have all three here in just a second. And then here's my alert break sound. If I click here, it's going to open my sound folders, and whatever sound file you have in your NinjaTrader sound folder, you can use for that alert. Same thing for the create. So create your own sound file, use alert 1, use alert 2, whatever it is that you want to use. And then our zone file, if we wanted to use that zone file, all of this is other than setting your colors and the type of alert and the sound file, is all available to choose from the drop-down menu. Now, a little further down, real quick, if you watched any of my videos, you already know this. I give you a toolbar icon settings as well. I place an icon in NinjaTrader's toolbar, and I give you the ability to change the color of whatever that is to the skin of your of whatever you're using in NinjaTrader. And then one last thing, if most indicators, when you stick them on your chart, will display, I can't get rid of that with this open, will display their name across the top. With mine, I provide a checkbox here under visual. So if you want to hide this up here, check this box, click apply, and it will no longer be on your chart. And then at the very bottom, you can always see what version you're on in my website. And I think that pretty much covers everything. Let's check here one last time. As always, if you have any questions, you can always reach out on Skype, leave a comment below. Thank you very much for your time.